Now, home is a lot of work. Just plain work. When work at home is planned and organized for cooperation, there can usually be more time for leisure.
I'm certainly in favor of those things. Leisure, fun.
Who isn't?
Wouldn't we all be happier if we worked out a little system for living together in harmony?
But how can we manage them?
We'll have to work out the full answer together.
Say, Mom, you're swell.
Most family problems can be solved through frank and friendly discussion, which points the way to a happy family life.
You know, this is beginning to be quite a family project.
It certainly is.
Blessings that come as a result. So there are different parents in terms of where your kids are in their stage of life, and then there are different parents in the way that you approach parenting. And so there are two extremes that need to be avoided. Most of you probably are on somewhere in more of a middle ground on the spectrum, but I've seen all different types of parents, okay? I've seen the parents who are more like the drill sergeant, the Bobby Knight version of parenting. I'm going to yell at you. I'm going to be really hard on you. I'm going to push you. You're going to be great. It's my responsibility to make a man out of you. You're not going to like me, but it's going to be better if I push you in this way. So these dads at basketball games, and I was at a tournament this week, I saw it so many times. Kid makes a mistake. Well, I saw one day, he didn't even play on our team. But I saw dad stand up and go like this. Literally like this to his kid. I'm like, I don't know how good you were, but like, what if I did that to you as a grown man? Like, you make a mistake at work and your boss just stands up. Like, okay, that's really effective, isn't it? It just makes you mad. It just makes you angry. It just makes you resent that person. So yeah, you can do that. You can be a tornado of rage over the smallest things. What do you think that's going to do to your relationship? And if I lean one way or the other, I lean more this way. More of a strict disciplinarian. But on the other side, we've got parents who insist on wrapping little Billy up in bubble wrap. Okay? Like, we're sending him to high school with his nook and his blankie. And these kids go to college and they have safe spaces. Whenever they get their feelings, I got a bad grade on a test, I need to go stand in front of this blue wall because blue's a soothing color, and I'm just going to rock back and forth. And you think I'm exaggerating? That actually happens on college campuses. It is astounding to me. And so you think, I'm going to protect my son, I'm going to protect my daughter. You're weakening them. And you're causing them to have problems and issues and invent things that really don't even exist. And so that needs to be avoided. So does this. You need to be balanced. The good thing with me is I lean this way, Shannon leads this way, and the two become one flesh, and we're even when you look at the two of us together. Okay, that was a marriage series thing. But we complete each other and complement each other's strengths and weaknesses. But I'm going to make an observation to you. You can think that I'm wrong. That's fine. Someday you'll have a microphone. You can talk into that and say things that are wrong too. Here's my observation. When I look at kids today, they have more than kids have ever had before. Phones, like $700, $800 phones, and all this access to different, like when I was a kid, you know, we had a Super Nintendo or a regular Nintendo, and that was like $80, brand new. The PlayStation 5's like $500 for the basic model. It's like, wow, those games are a lot more expensive. They take a lot more time and energy. So kids have more technology across the board, iPads, the Switch, PS5, Xbox, whatever. They also have more opportunities in sports than we've ever had before. So like, we did play travel basketball when I was a kid. Randy Knox was our coach. We traveled around basically Southern Illinois. We didn't go out of state. He never let us play games on Sundays and miss church. Part of his thing as a coach. We would travel around and we'd play. Now, like, there are so many tournaments. In fact, these tournaments have all these different brackets. Have you noticed this? If you're a parent, you notice. So there's the gold bracket, there's the bronze bracket, there's the silver bracket, there's the frankincense bracket, the titanium bracket, so that everybody gets a ring or a medal or a trophy when it's all said and done. And now, granted, you're going to pay $1,000 for your team to be in a tournament, you better walk away with something. So you have all of these, so you have all this, there are like so many travel teams, so many levels of travel teams. You have all these different expert coaches that are teaching kids how to hit, how to shoot, how to pitch, all this stuff. There's no limit to how much sports you can be indoctrinated with. So we have more stuff than ever before, more opportunities at sports. Same thing is true for like tutoring and knowledge and getting into college. We also have, I just was noticing this, every time I drive by the high school parking lot, the cars are nicer than they've ever been, okay? Like, no one's driving the 1990 Volkswagen Corrado that I was rolling around in, okay? The White Rabbit. Nobody's driving that anymore. That thing, AC didn't work, heat didn't work, which I didn't even think was possible, because it's like, isn't the engine producing heat? How is there no heat coming into the car? Just didn't work, man. It was perfect, yes. And let me tell you something. I'd scrape the outside. I have scraped the inside before I drove it on a cold winter day, doggone it. And you're right. I was better for it. Power steering didn't work. There was a leak. I just kept adding. But I got really good shoulder muscles turning that thing. Well, kids they're driving $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 vehicles. None of that is wrong on its face value, okay? Your kid has a PS5, I'm not trying to beat you up. They have the new iPhone, I'm not trying to beat you up. That's not the point I'm trying to make. Here's the point. We have more than we've ever had before, access to more than we ever have had before, and yet, kids are more depressed than they've ever been. They are more anxious and suffer from anxiety more than they ever have. There is less content in life, even though they have more. Like, what is this? If we have, we think as parents, we got to give them all of these opportunities, we got to give them all this stuff, and yet we're worse off than we've ever been. What is it? Well, in addition to giving them all the stuff, we've also not given them Jesus. There's less Jesus in our families, in our lives, in our schools. And you start taking Jesus out of it, you're going to have more depression. You're going to have more anxiety. You're going to have more fear. You're going to have all kinds of issues. Because Jesus is the solution to the majority of those problems. And I know, some kids are like, I got to get my kid on medication. They got to go see a therapist. They got to go see a counselor. That's all good stuff. I'm not the guy who, when he breaks his arm, says, I'm just going to pray for this to be healed. I'm going to go to a professional, have them wrap it in a cast so my arm heals. I'm not against this other stuff. But you need to understand that Jesus is the most important thing and solves all of these problems so that a kid can be content and happy driving a 1990 Volkswagen Corrado to school and just be thankful that he's got something that has wheels and moves, okay? And so you want to be a good parent. You want to set your kids up for success. This is the most important thing. Your primary responsibility is to teach your kids about Jesus. That's numero uno. That's the most important thing. Listen, you teach them how to shoot a good jump shot, you get them into a great college, you teach them how to work hard, how to manage their finances, all that's really good stuff. But if you neglect this, none of that's going to matter. And when you think about this, now obviously as a pastor, I'm big on the Jesus stuff, big on the Bible. You want your kids to have a good work ethic and work hard? Teach them about Jesus. Teach them from Scripture, because that's in there. You want them to be a good person and kind and nice to everybody, someone who stands up for a kid who's an outcast or a kid who's picked on by a bully. You know what you need to do? Teach them about Jesus, because that's in there. You want them to manage their money well, not get into debt so that they're stressed out all the time about money. Teach them about Jesus. That's in there. Like all the stuff that you would say, I want this for my kid, it's in there. Now, to be fair, you want your kid to shoot a good jump shot? Get the ball in the shooting pocket, come up, shoot through the body. Not in there, okay, to be fair. You're like, what is that, 2 Maccabees chapter 12? Isn't that where the proper jump shot thing? I want my kid to throw a good curveball. Oh, yeah, that's in the Apocrypha as well. Okay, that's 2 Ezra. You just turn there and it teaches you how to, that's not in there. But you teach them the Jesus stuff and the importance of work ethic and perspective in life, that other stuff will come. But if you neglect the Jesus stuff, you're going to be setting your kid up for failure in life. Because what you have, and just think about sports, academia, whatever it is. Look at the best athletes in our world. Are they the happiest people? Do they have things all figured out? It's like, I want my kid to be like that. You say that, it's like from a basketball perspective. But you don't want them to treat their wife like that NBA star treats his wife. Because he was on the news. He beat her up in a hotel lobby. Like, he's got like 8 kids, all these different, like, that's what you want for your son? Or that's what you want for your daughter? Surely not. Then why are you pushing them to pursue life in that way? Like, you've got to have this as a staple in your life and in the life of your family. I cannot overstate this enough. If you get this right, everything else falls into place. You get this wrong, doesn't matter what else you do. Like, there are drastic consequences for getting this wrong. Now, if you've got it wrong up to this point, God's grace is mighty and it's powerful. It is not too late to get things back or to get things right or to figure things out. And just like with your marriage, you want your kids to get this right, you've got to start getting it right in your life so that you can pass it down to them. Because if you've got it wrong and you're pursuing it wrong, you can't just drop them off at church and then think that everything's going to be hunky-dory. We'll let the church teach the kids about Jesus. I'll send them to Kids Zone. They can learn about Jesus there. They're in Kids Zone 52 hours a year. And we do our best to kind of coach them and guide them and direct them. But we have them a very small window of their life. You're with them more in a week than we are an entire year. Who do you think is going to have a bigger impact on teaching them about what following Jesus looks like? It's you, as a parent. And we use something here at our church called Orange Curriculum. So there are apps that go along with it, and there are all these different types of videos and lessons and questions that you can ask that go along with what those kids, whether they're toddlers or they're in the 5th grade, that they're learning. And the same is true for our junior and senior hires. In fact, every junior senior high lesson, we're going through one right now called Bittersweet, and how withholding forgiveness can be, and being bitter can be a sweet thing short term. So what does it mean to forgive, and what does it mean to love well when a person wrongs you? So we're doing that right now for our Elevate crew. And there's every single series that we go through, there's a daily devotion, a daily Bible study that goes along with it. We coach our kids to follow. But it's like, I can talk to them for the 2 hours that I've got them, but they're going to be with you Monday through Sunday at 5 o'clock. I can't help, or I can't do it all. Even though I'm with them and I'm teaching them and I'm helping them, I can't do it all. It's got to be a partnership that parents recognize this is my primary job, and so I'm going to create opportunities and put them in environments and look for moments throughout our lives so that we can model what following Jesus looks like, and we can use movies and things that we see and just times where we're sitting having dinner to talk about faith, to talk about God, to talk about the Bible. We're going to keep it as natural and loose as possible. It's not like you're going to sit down at dinner like, okay, kids, turn to James chapter 4, tonight's dinner devotional, as we're going to talk, like, because they're like, But as you're eating, you go, I saw something interesting today at work, and then you talk about it, and it's like everything goes back to Jesus, because everything does go back in our lives to Christ. So you have got to be strategic, and you've got to do these things on purpose, because it's not just going to happen naturally. Your kids aren't going to learn about God and what it means to follow Jesus by accident. You have to put forth the effort and come up with a plan to make it happen. Have I talked about it enough yet to where in your mind you're hopefully going, okay, what are we going to do? Yeah, because we've got them for like 18 years, and then they're gone. I've got an 11-year-old, almost 12. I basically have 6 years left with that kid. I've jacked him up his first 11 and a half years. I got to get things right. Like, time is precious, isn't it? It's like, you mean that he's got like a third of his time left with me? 2/3 are already gone? How did that happen? It goes by quick, doesn't it? And whether you got kids in the home or whatever, like everybody who's older than you will say, it goes by quick. Do not waste your time as a parent letting your calendar be filled up with all this stuff and getting lost in the day-to-day routines and just trying to stay above water, that days go by and then months go by and then years go by and then your kids, 18 years go by and you didn't teach them the most important thing. In fact, when you look at kids coming to Jesus, if they graduate high school without entering a relationship with Christ, they've got like a 10 to 15% chance of being introduced to Jesus and starting a relationship with Him if you let them go off to college or let her go off to college without Christ. Whereas, if you've got them in church and they're in a small group environment and they're learning about Christ and you're trying to reiterate that, like there's a 75% chance that they're going to meet Jesus in junior high. And it gets really tricky, like, okay, well, what sticks and do kids wander away? Like, I would just rather them be dialed in early because they're more likely to be dialed in when they become an adult. And if you've got, like, oh, okay, my kids are grown. My kids are grown and they're gone. This is still your primary responsibility. And when you have grandkids or you have great-grandkids, this is still your primary responsibility. It never changes. Because this is the thing that echoes into eternity. Nobody's going to stand before God. And St. Peter throws him a basketball. All right, show me your jump shot. If it's a good-looking shot and you make this free throw, you get into heaven. If you miss it, but I didn't play basketball as a kid. I guess your parents didn't love you. You think that's going to happen? But that's how we parent. We parent as if basketball, softball, volleyball, grades, money, we parent as if these are the most important things, and if this isn't right, everything's lost. The opposite's true. If this is right, everything's fine. If this is wrong, doesn't matter what happens. Have I overstated the point yet? You're like, yeah, come on, move on, give me something else. This is the most important thing you can do as a parent. And I hope that you're starting to sweat a little bit. Like, my kids are in here with me. He just keeps talking about it. He won't leave it alone. They're going to be talking about it on the way home. Now we're going to have to do something about it. Good. I hope so. I can talk like that because my kids are somewhere else right now, so it doesn't really matter as much for me. So in Deuteronomy chapter 6, we're going to cover this, and then we're going to jump to 1 Corinthians 13 for a few moments. Deuteronomy chapter 6, what you have is Moses talking to the Israelites. They're about to go into the promised land. He's like, I want it to go well for you when you go into the promised land. So this is what you need to do, and this is what you need to be about. And he coaches them very clearly and very directly. Your responsibility is teaching your kids about Jesus, or not Jesus, about a relationship with God. Jesus hadn't come yet in the Old Testament. You're like, So it's just a relationship with God at that point. What following Yahweh actually looks like, how it plays out. And he coaches them on how they're supposed to do it. So here's how he jumps in. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 1. He says, these are the commands, decrees, and laws the Lord your God directed me to teach you to observe in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess. So you've got things like the Ten Commandments. You've got things like, okay, this is what you do if somebody steals their neighbor's ox. Or these are the types of food that you're allowed to eat or not eat. God gave a lot of specific commands because he wanted his people to be set apart and be different and not worship him the way that all of these people worshiped their gods. And he said there's a reason for that. So that you, your children, and their children after them may fear the Lord your God as long as you live by keeping all his decrees and commands that I give you. And so that you may enjoy a long life. And I think this is from a supernatural, spiritual perspective. I think it's from a practical perspective as well. If you live the way God wants you to live, if you eat the way God wants you to eat, if you manage your money the way, you will enjoy a long life. From a practical, but then God's blessing being on you, it's a supernatural blessing, and it comes to you as well. In verse 3 he says, Hear, O Israel, And be careful to obey so that it may go well with you and that you may increase greatly in the land, flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, promised you. And then, in verse 4, he gives what the Jews call the great Shema, which Jesus points to as the greatest of all the commandments. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Now, it's interesting that he says the Lord is one. And it doesn't mean that he's number one, even though he is. But the Hebrew word there is the same one that is used for a husband and wife. The two will become one flesh. That you have oneness and unity and yet distinction between the two parties that become one. And in the case of God, you have one God, three persons, Father, Son, and Spirit. The Lord your God is one. And yet, each person is distinguished. Like even way back in the Old Testament, the idea of the Trinity is taught indirectly. But he says that these commandments that I give you today, they are to be on your hearts. They're not just to be, faith, hope, and love, words and decor that you have in your house. They're not just to be words on a page. Like, I think, it's like 90-something% of Americans own a Bible. So it's not like, hey, everybody needs to own a Bible, even though I think you should. Okay, we've got our Bible. Like, how many of you have a family Bible that weighs like 150 pounds? And it's huge, and you would never read from it because it's a workout just to open it up and get to a certain passage of Scripture. It's there, and it's decorative. A lot of people have like these old decorative Bibles. It's like, yay for us, and I know it's passed down from family, and there's nothing wrong with it, unless you're never reading your Bible. Then it's like a rabbit's foot that sits on your coffee table. This is our family good luck charm. We've got the Bible. Well, if the words are just on the page and not in your heart, if you don't interact with them, if you don't learn from them, if you don't apply the principles, then a Bible in your house doesn't do you a lot of good. It's just decor at that point. And so he says, you need to make sure that these words are put on your heart. And he says, and not only yours, but on your kids as well. So he goes on in verse 7, he says, impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. He could have just said, just talk about it all the time. Every moment's an opportunity to talk about Jesus. But he unpacks so that he can connect the dots for them. Oh, so when we're sitting down and having dinner, great time to talk about Jesus. And when you're in the car, because we don't walk along the road, we get in cars and we drive. It's an opportunity to talk about Jesus. And when you're getting ready for bed, it's an opportunity to talk about Jesus. When you get up in the morning, you're making breakfast, everybody's getting ready. It's an opportunity to talk about Jesus. There's no time that's a bad time to talk about faith. And Moses is like, you need to look for these strategic moments where Jesus is a part of the conversation, where Jesus is a part of the discussion. Because we talk about everything else, don't we? You get in a car after a basketball game, and, mom says things like, you were great. You just did a wonderful job. Wow, you're so good at basketball. Yay, you. And dad's like, hey, let me tell you something. Okay, now listen. You do not close out right. You don't chop your feet. You go running up there like a goober and get down. And, hey, get your hands out when you play defense. And when you catch the ball, get squared up early. You're catching the ball and you're standing with your back to the bat. Like that's how dads are and that's how moms are. Most of the time. You talk about stuff all the time, don't you? You have teaching moments all the time. At least I do. Well, every part of life. And sometimes I'll point out other people. Like, hey, look what they're doing. That's not good. They shouldn't be doing that. Look at the way he's talking to his wife. You don't talk to your wife that way. Like, every moment's a teaching moment. And we teach our kids. We should be teaching our kids all the time. But you know what? I was just thinking about this. When I go to a restaurant and I see a family sitting down and eating, you know what they're doing? They're not talking. You know what they're doing? All of them. Could be 5 or 6 people sitting at the table. They're all doing this. They all have their own device. They're just looking. Everything else going on in the world is more interesting than you people. So I'm going to just go here. Now, there are times where you got to look something. Oh, what time is practice? You look something up. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But you have got to, hey, put your phone down. I know your teenager didn't want to hear that. I know they don't want to do that. They also don't want to eat vegetables and go to school. You're going to make them do those things too, right? I hope. My brother's like 5'9" because he didn't eat his vegetables when he was a kid. He's supposed to be 6'6", true story. But anyway, I digress. Don't tell him I said that, by the way. So there are times in your life where you make your kids do what they don't want to do because you know that it's good for them. That's what being a parent is. And so as a parent, you too need to put your phone down, put it in your pocket, stop checking it, and have an actual real conversation with your family. So just think about, okay, are there moments in our families like we're all sitting in the room together, either at home at dinner or we're sitting on the couch and everybody's just, and Dad's got his glasses up half the time and down half the time because can't see it. I turn it, son, I turn this. Oh, okay, there we go. Oh, there it is, there it is. And the kids are doing their own thing and nobody's interacting with anybody else. That is a problem. And it, in many ways, is a commentary on where we're at as families. This is a responsibility that you as parents have. And, they would go to a worship service during this time period. Okay? The Jews would corporately worship. And Moses is saying, in addition to that, make sure that you have all these moments to teach your kids about what following God looks like. Because it's so, so important. It goes on to say, tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates. And basically saying, put them on your hands. May the things that you do be impacted by your understanding of who God is and how much He loves. Everything you do needs to be about that. Keep God on the front of your mind. It's always there. And if you put these words and these teachings and these commands on your heart, they're going to be most likely in the front of your mind. And the more you talk about them, the more that they're going to be there. Now, the Jews have made actual boxes that they tie to their foreheads. They're called phylacteries. I think they missed the point. Because here's what happens with the Jewish people. They do not coach their kids in this way. And what happens over time is they continue to drift further and further and further away from God. Each generation gets further and further and further away from God. Because the generation before wasn't intentional and strategic about pointing their kids back to God. Now, when you look at our country, I believe that we are getting further and further and further and further away from God. You can disagree with me if you would like. I will show you Leave It to Beaver, and then I'll show you a popular show that's on today, and you tell me which one looks more like a wholesome, good, godly show. If your kid came home and was like, gee golly, that wouldn't upset you a whole lot. But some of the stuff I hear, it's like, oh, they better never talk like that. At least not around me. Because I want to be loving, patient, and kind. We're going to talk about that in a second. I don't know if I can with that. And so, as we continue to drift, what's going to stop the bleeding? What's going to help kids get to where they're supposed to be? It's this. And parents, it's our job to make sure that we point our kids to Christ and we teach them what a relationship with Him looks like, and we model that for them so that the drift, at least in our family tree or on our family tree, will stop. Now, I want to transition for a moment. I want to talk about 1 Corinthians 13. I'm just going to talk about two attributes. So this is love is patient, love is kind, it doesn't envy, it doesn't boast. And whenever sometimes we apply that to marriage, and it certainly can. Sometimes we apply that to different relationships, difficult relationships at work or within our family. It definitely applies there as well. And it also applies to parenting. And so I want us to talk about just love is patient, love is kind. Because we got to beat the Baptist to lunch today. And I don't want to go too long, okay? So we're just going to talk about two of them and try to unpack them and look at it from the perspective of parenting. Because 1 Corinthians 13 gives us a perfect look at what love is. The best example is Jesus on the cross. The best description is 1 Corinthians 13. And as we know, it begins with love is patient. And when you think about your kids and exercising patience with your kids, this kind of deals with a lot of different areas. One is, you think about the way that you discipline your son or your daughter. God is slow to anger, described that way in the Old Testament so many times. And we, when we discipline, need to make sure that we discipline from a place of absolute control. So that way you don't say something or do something that you're going to regret later. Patience is, I'm going to do this because this is what my child needs, and not, I'm going to do this because I'm mad. I'm going to do this because it's going to make me feel better, to talk to them this way, to take away this electronic. You can't discipline from that place, and it's going to cause tension in the relationship. Now, listen, I put my kids in timeout, I take things away, I give them a little encouragement on their backside when they need it. That was primarily when they were younger. Now that they're older, we don't have to do that as much. But you do need to be disciplining your kids. But patience is, I'm in control when I discipline. Complete control. And I can think through what I'm saying and what I'm doing and how we're going to deal with this. The other thing is, from a discipline side, you decide what gets disciplined, how it gets disciplined before it happens. Because in the moment, you're trying to figure it out. You're going to be too lenient. You're going to be too heavy, depending on your personality and kind of your default mode. And so when they're disobedient, when they are disrespectful, when they do things that are dangerous to them that they know better than, you need to know these are the consequences for this types of action. Sometimes you get onto them and say, your mom and I are going to discuss this. Your dad and I, we're going to discuss this to figure out what your punishment's going to be. That's fair to do. But whenever you think about patience too, it's also allowing them to progress in life age appropriately and not comparing them to everybody else. So if little Billy across the street can already shoot an actual jump shot at whatever his age is, doesn't mean that your son or daughter needs to be able to yet. Just allow them to grow and develop. Those things are going to happen. They're going to fall into place. Everybody moves and grows and develops at a different pace. I grew a foot in high school. I was a tiny little dude when I was in junior high. And it's my parents couldn't get mad because, well, how come you're not taller yet? I'm eating my vegetables. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So you got to be patient with your kids and allow them to grow academically and athletically at their own pace. The other thing is, you got to be patient with your kids as they make age-appropriate mistakes. So if your 3, 4, or 5-year-old spills their drink, guess what? They're a little kid. Motor skills are not quite developed yet. It's going to happen. And if you see them go to the refrigerator and get water in a cup and fill it to an appropriate level, because sometimes they go above the line, and then it's going to spill no matter what. And if you tell them, hey, you can't fill it that high, you can get them in trouble for that. But there have been times where it's my kids turn around and they're walking, and all of a sudden just their body stops working. Water everywhere. What do you want to do as a parent? You want to lose your mind. Can't. I always think back to when I'm about to look, why am I mad right now? Because I have to clean it up. That's why I'm mad. They made an age-appropriate mistake that now I have to deal with. Well, guess what? You're a parent. Jockey up and clean up the mess, because that just happened. Now, if they're balancing the cup over their head and trying to walk to the table, now you can get on to them. Maybe my kids are the only ones who do stuff like that. But now you can get on them because they made a mess. But I can remember I was 16 years old working at Mount Vernon Bob Evans, and I spilled 5 drinks on one guy. It was bad. I'm glad none of them was coffee, but it had some tea and some soft drinks there, and they got a free meal out of it and a coupon to come back, which I don't think that they did, coincidentally. And it wasn't because I was trying to be cute and do stuff. I was really trying hard. Fun fact, that was my last day as a server, actually, as well. They put me back in the host stand after that. People are going to make mistakes, and they're going to make mistakes not because they're acting inappropriately, but because they're a human being. So your kids are going to get a bad grade on a test every once in a while. If they stayed up and played video games for 12 hours and then went to school and didn't study, okay, now we can have a conversation about it. But you're going to make mistakes, you're going to drop the ball, you're going to make messes, and you have to give them kind of a little bit of leeway to be a kid and be patient with the mistakes that they make. And I would say that grandparents are much better at this, but that's because they feel like they bear no responsibility. My mom as a grandma is not like my mom as a mom. My mom was strict and on it. As a grandma, I'm like, you let them do what? She's like, oh, well, it's your job to fix it. So they go there and my parents undo everything that I did. Not really. But it is like, yeah, you are definitely different as a grandma. Well, it's because you're older, you have more life experience, and you recognize that not everything that happens is like DEFCON 3 end of the world type of stuff. You're just able to let it go. And when you think about as a parent, you're responsible for like keeping your kid on the straight and narrow so you feel this burden. But everything has to be done through patience. And I would say too, it's okay to let your kids fail. Let your kids make mistakes. On the Orange app, my wife was looking on it last night, and it's an app that we use here at our church so that you know what your kids are learning. You can reiterate the lesson. And there was a quote that came up on the Orange app, and it said, "Don't ruin your kids' future by making their lives easier now. Don't make your kids' future harder by making their today easier or more pleasant." So we have to fix everything and no. Just let it go. And sometimes patience is, I'm going to let you figure this out. So if little Billy forgets his hat and he's got a baseball game, Mom, I forgot my hat. That's a shame. I hate that for you. See what your coach wants to do about it. Does he want to run you? Is he going to sit you that game? I hate that for you, but I reminded you 1,000 times to bring your hat. Now, I was notorious for stuff like that when I was a kid. I'd forget my hat, forgot my cross-country jersey, I don't know how many times. And Mike McClure was not a guy that you would, easily, Coach, I forgot my hat. Well, that's okay. I've got extra hats. Here you go. He'd say, boy, you'd forget your head if it wasn't attached, wouldn't you? Like, yeah. And I would sit the bench. Well, guess how many times I forgot my hat? Less than I would have if somebody saved me every single time that I forgot something. We didn't have cell phones back then. I'm glad we didn't, because if I tried to text my mom, Mom, I forgot my hat, I would love to hear how that conversation would go. Mom would never jump in and save me. Now, Grandma would. Grandma would save me. Mom didn't like it. But when I got to high school, I didn't forget my shorts. I didn't forget my shoes. I didn't forget my hat, because I knew I couldn't, because there was nobody who was going to come in and rescue me. And with our kids, part of patience is just let it play out. Don't jump in and rescue every single time something goes wrong. Now, you can be as frustrated as him. Mom, I forgot my shorts. Well, I got practice today. What am I going to do? Man, I don't know. I really hate that for you. I do. I've got a little stress and anxiety too, but listen, you have got to learn to remember your shorts when you go to practice, and you've got to figure this out. That'd be the best thing for them. I've used the example before of baby giraffes. I love it. I don't love baby giraffes necessarily, but this illustration, it's so telling. Mom has a baby giraffe. The baby giraffe tries to stand up. And like you've seen baby giraffes, right? Long legs, lack of balance. So when it finally stands up, you know what the mama giraffe does? Poof, knocks it down on the ground. It when you see it happening, like I was watching a nature show and I was like, that seems horrible. Mama giraffes are the worst moms in all of the human animal kingdom. The baby giraffe finally gets back up, poof, knocks it down again. Gets back up, poof, knocks it down again. Starts to walk a little bit, poof, knocks it down. And you're like, this is horrible. And then the British commentator, and they always have British commentators because they sound more intelligent than Americans do, don't they? Well, the mama giraffe, I'm terrible at that. But you never have somebody from Alabama doing the commentary. Well, here's what the mama giraffe's trying to do, because it doesn't translate the same way. So you got this British commentator, and he says the mama giraffe knows that in the Sahara there are lions and hyenas that are going to try to eat her baby. And she's got to get her baby ready to get up and move quickly. So she knocks it down because she knows what I'm doing to it to prepare it for life in the wild is a lot better than being eaten by a lion or something else. And so it's I'm going to let you fall down several times because I know it's going to make you stronger. And I would say, and you could disagree with me if that's fine, but you would be wrong, that kids today are weaker physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Most importantly, spiritually. And they're weaker because we've allowed them to be. If you went to work tomorrow and your boss said, hey, free day, you want to work today, that's great. If you want to be on YouTube and social media the whole day, that's fine too. What are adults going to do? They're going to be on YouTube watching cat videos or whatever it is. I don't know what people watch. They're going to be watching stuff. They're not going to work. And the boss could say, you know what, if you guys could work, that'd be great. But if you don't, I'm never going to get you in trouble. I'm never going to hold you accountable. Whatever you get done is what you get done. If you don't get stuff done, that's fine. People aren't working. They're not going to get stuff done. So with our kids, if we have the same MO, if we rescue them from everything, if there's no accountability, if there are no challenges, what do you think is going to happen to them? So patience is not, I'm going to never get them in trouble. Patience is, I'm going to appropriately discipline them, and I'm going to let them fail. That's hard to do, isn't it? Because we want to help. I just want to help. I want to be there for them. I want to help. If you want to help, step away. Don't rescue them every time something goes wrong. Don't always take their side when there's confrontation with a teacher or a coach or a referee or whatever. Sometimes it is little Billy's fault. Sometimes Bobby does get out of line. And the teacher has to hold him accountable. And your job isn't to go, well, he got in trouble. Why did you get him in trouble? Your job is to go, you got in trouble? When you come home, we're going to have ourselves a little conversation. That's what's best for little Billy. And Bobby and Susie and all the E's that you could think of. But you got to have the courage to do that. And it's not about always being liked as a parent. It's about doing what is right in love. And if you focus on doing that, you're not going to sever the relationship. You're not going to break things up so that when they become adults, they're going to resent you. They'll probably love you and respect you for it. I was thinking about, Mike McClure this week, and, McClure was a yeller. And his voice echoed. People in Waltonville reported, earthquakes when he would yell sometimes. They're like, oh, earth's shaking. What is that? Oh, that's Coach McClure. They got a game tonight. He's boom, boom, with that booming voice. Sometimes that booming voice was directed at me. And I get yelled at. And there was no safe space. Not when I was a kid. I couldn't run to my mom because she agreed with Coach. I had to figure it out on my own. And there were times I was upset, and there were times I was frustrated, there were times I was angry. But whenever Coach McClure was alive, and I'd see him at a game, I'd shake his hand. We'd talk for however long we could, and I had the utmost respect for him as a coach because he didn't take it easy on me. He never crossed the line. Coach McClure never crossed the line. He was probably more patient with me than my mom would have been as a coach. That's for doggone sure. So I'm not saying that, hey, if you got Bobby Knight who chokes kids, they need to deal with it and figure it out. No, I'm not saying that. But it's okay if your kids are held accountable. It's okay if they're appropriately yelled at. It'll make them better for it. So you see the balance here, the tension? You can't put them in bubble wrap. Send them to high school with their Nook. Here's your stuffy. Here's your blankie. Basically where we're headed towards. And at the same time, you've got to make sure that you're not Bobby Knight, drill sergeant, and that everything is... Because you're disciplining and coaching not only for their future and being an active member of society, but also for your relationship long term. And if you give them Jesus and nothing else, you've given them everything they need in life.